opposed say no. The motion is agreed to, and the bills are ordered to be reported favorably. I recognize Ranking Member Cantwell for another motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that PN 620 Coast Guard promotions be favorably reported.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The motion is agreed to, and the nomination is ordered to be reported favorably. I ask for unanimous consent that staff are authorized to make technical and conforming changes without objection so ordered. Are there any members wishing to make remarks on any of the agenda items?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to request on the record for the nomination of Ryan McCormick, PN 73046, that Senator Peters and Baldwin like to be recorded as a no. I would also like to request to correct the record for the nomination of Robert Harvey. Senator Peters would like to be recorded as a yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection. If there are no further comments, that concludes the markup, and we'll move on to the hearing. Good morning. Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation will come to order. Before I begin my opening statement, today marks the 17th anniversary of the Colgan Air Flight 3407 accident in New York. We remember the 50 lives lost as we somberly meet to discuss another deadly aviation accident. Aviation safety relies on the Swiss cheese model to mitigate and manage risk. Layers upon layers of human intervention and technology are meant to close any vulnerabilities or figurative holes left by the previous layer. Unfortunately, just over 1 year ago, that safety system failed just 3 miles from here at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. For more than 15 years, pilots, controllers, and reams of aviation data detected at least one near midair collision each and every month at National Airport. In 2013, after a helicopter and plane on approach to DCA nearly crashed into each other, controllers and helicopter operators formed a working group to improve coordination in the local airspace. That group met often, and at some point even elevated recommendations to revise and improve mapped flight routes to show known hotspots. But their suggestions were ignored. That's one of the many failures uncovered by the NTSB that, had people responded differently, tragedy would have been avoided last year. I want to commend NTSB Chairwoman Jennifer Homendy and all of the NTSB staff for their efforts. They did yeoman's work to complete the DCA crash investigation in just 12 months. In addition to examining the causes of the DCA accident, the NTSB made 50 recommendations to improve aviation safety. One of those recommendations, arguably the most impactful one, should be familiar. For the 18th time, let me repeat that, for the 18th time, the NTSB is urging aircraft in busy airspace to have ADSB on board. Had the Black Hawk and Bombardier CRJ been equipped to receive ADSB location signals on January 29th, 2025, the pilots would have been warned of each other's exact position nearly 1 minute before impact. And 67 people would still be alive today. Instead, the CRJ's pilots didn't see the helicopter until a split second before impact, while the helicopter crew, it appears, never saw the CRJ. The NTSB review revealed another major safety loophole. Military aircraft were routinely ignoring rules that required aircraft flying in busy airspace to transmit ADSB signals. Although planes don't share locations with each other via ADSB, they must broadcast such information to air traffic control. But the Army uses a special carve-out so that it didn't have to consistently comply with the broadcast mandate. Moreover, the NTSB discovered that this particular helicopter's ADSB out wasn't even configured correctly. After the January crash, the FAA eliminated the military's blanket exemption. But just a few weeks ago, a brand new loophole was tucked into the annual defense authorization bill, making it easier for the military to continue flying without ADSB around DCA. If we learned anything from the DCA crash, it's that you can't have a safe airspace when operators are following different sets of rules. That's why our committee authored and passed the bipartisan Rotor Act. The Rotor Act, which passed the Senate unanimously in December, rescinds that new defense bill loophole, and it enacts the central NTSB recommendation of this investigation. The Rotor Act requires all aircraft in congested airspace to broadcast their location to each other via ADSB. The Rotor Act ensures a commercial airliner landing in a major airport has visibility in daytime or in darkness to any nearby aircraft, whether it's a military helicopter or a general aviation pilot, and vice versa. No more flying blind. The Rotor Act will begin to protect the flying public now, airlines, from ADSB, given that Flight 5342 was a regional airline. I hope my House colleagues don't wait for another accident or for the NTSB to have to come back and recommend ADSB for the 19th time before acting. And the notion that somehow private jets should receive a blanket exception makes no sense whatsoever. I don't know how anyone can look in the eyes of the victims' families and justify that argument. I also hope the House doesn't try to resolve the dozens of other safety recommendations from the NTSB, because we know this particular one on ADSB can start now and save lives. Today, there are planes taking off from Ronald Reagan National Airport. Today, there are planes landing at Ronald Reagan National Airport. There are planes that may have your loved ones on them or my loved ones on them. And every single day we delay, we are putting our families in danger for no reason whatsoever. In the room with us today are loved ones of the 67 men, women, and children who were killed in last January's crash. I'm encouraged and inspired by your tireless advocacy for safer skies. It pains all of us to know that your lives have been irreparably changed. There's nothing we can do to bring back your spouses, your children, your parents, your cousins, or your friends. But I hope that we can turn your grief into action. Thank you for working so hard to make sure that no other family has to suffer the kind of tragedy that you're feeling the pain of each and every day. I now turn to Ranking Member Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is a very important hearing this morning. I feel like it's almost a culmination of years to finally get a report so crisp and clear about the failures of the FAA and what it needs to do to change its culture. I too want to remind and remember the individuals here about the Colgan Air crash. Our heart still goes out to the families affected by that incident, including people from Seattle. I also want to say that the Colgan families have been a constant presence in this room. And while that is not the way the political system is supposed to work, where the victims have to come and be the biggest advocates for safety. That is certainly what the Colgan Air families have done, so we certainly remember them today. And I want to also just say, Mr. Chairman, that yesterday's incident at El Paso reminds me of why this interagency coordination is so important. If we can get into this kind of conflict where the FAA is saying that we're going to shut down airspace for 10 days, and then another agency is saying something different, and there's concern about what is happening in the airspace, it just seems to me that we have a real problem of coordination between DOD and FAA. So we need to resolve that. I hope that your calls for an interagency briefing will be heeded and that we will get to the bottom of this. Not one more day needs to go by without that kind of information and oversight for the public. But we are here today to thank Chair Homendy and the NTSB and to thank them for their recommendations and findings after a thorough, long investigation into the tragic crash in DCA last year. The loss of 67 souls when an Army helicopter collided with American Airlines 5342 has weighed heavily on many of us, but certainly the families who are most affected. Our hearts go out to you. Many of the family members are here today, and I know they will be following today's discussion very closely. You have stood with us to make our aviation system safer, including your support for the Rotor Act, which was critical in trying to push this legislation through the United States Senate and hopefully to get it to the President's desk. I want to thank Chair Homendy again for her work with her team tirelessly delivering answers to these families. I know that you deliver a lot of answers and information to us. I think no one knows how hard that is in delivering the information to the families. I know from our own air accidents with the seaplane in Seattle, how trying to find the victims of that crash, there's just so much work that goes into communicating with the families, and so we thank you for that as well. These answers demonstrate that this tragedy was a result of many systematic failures, and that failed everyone on Flight 5342 and the Army helicopters and the air traffic controllers. And so this is part of a larger trend where we have to be the ones that put a stop to this finally. We have witnessed multiple near misses between commercial airline flights and military flights, including a helicopter flying too close to DCA traffic last May, exposing communication failures between the Pentagon Air Traffic Control Tower and the DC Tower, and a near mid-air collision between an Air Force tanker and JetBlue flying from Caraco back to the United States. These incidents are just unacceptable. So we look forward to the 14 recommendations that you are making today, especially the issue of NTSB and the larger FAA reforms. I am concerned that the NTSB found that the FAA and Army are dangerously over-relied on pilots to see and avoid. How can a congested airspace rely on see and avoid? Other traffic around National Capital Region, the NTSB found these practices created an unacceptable risk, especially without the help of a key safety technology that we've already implemented in so many other aspects of our airspace, ADS-B in and ADS-B out. NTSB has also emphasized having TCAS is not enough, not enough. The CRJ pilots did not get air traffic alerts at lower altitudes below 900 feet, and pilot alerts are more limited if ADS-B in data is not feeding into the system. Last week, the NTSB issued their 18th recommendation in 20 years on this type of technology, ADS-B in and out, that basically is the alert system that we expected in the digital age to be implemented 20 years ago. So recommending that all aircraft are required to fly in a controlled airspace with this to ensure pilots have real-time awareness and traffic alerts, both in the air and on the ground, is just the last piece of an aviation safety system safeguard that has been recommended for years. And the question is, why hasn't someone been doing it? Money cannot be the answer because the cost of lives has been too great. The Bipartisan Rotor Act also is key in the NTSB recommendations, and it will help to save and strengthen the oversight. NTSB reinforced that the FAA and Army had access to safety data in years leading up to the crash that warned of heightened risk of midair collisions in DC, but the FAA failed to act on that, as did the Army. So NTSB's investigation of the DCA collision and the Air Alaska door plug accident showed that the FAA's safety management system has been superficial at best. While the FAA has mandated SMS, a safety management system, which means when you have a safety problem, you have to stop and fix it. That's all that safety management system means. It means you have to stop and fix it. It means don't keep going on production, don't keep going on your system until you fix the safety risk. But if you don't have a real SMS, then it really doesn't stop to fix the safety concerns. That is why the legislation we passed this morning is a start. We will hear from experts about why the FAA needs to do this, similar to the expert witnesses that provided us so much information about the MAX crashes. With the committee's vote on this today, I think we are one step closer. And we certainly know that controllers who voiced safety concerns about helicopter routes and stressful controller workloads were also ignored by FAA managers. So we have to fix this as well. Mr. Chairman, I stand ready to work with you on getting the Rotor Act onto the President's desk. This is critical legislation that will help now, and we also have more work to do because this sequence of events and the events at El Paso show us that we have real communication issues, and we must do our oversight role. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I look forward to Chair Homendy's important testimony this morning.
Thank you. I now recognize Chairman Moran for an opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I join in supporting and commending your opening statement, you and the ranking member. I appreciate the demands and sentiments that you both expressed. I appreciate the way that you both have carried out this, conducting the hearings of allowing our subcommittee to take a significant role in pursuing safety measures and really directing the leadership, providing the leadership to this committee to take concrete actions to prevent other accidents from occurring in the future. We continue to mourn the losses of the victims. We express our condolences on behalf of citizens of my state. We express our condolences to the members of the family who are present here today and those who are not. We remember the heroism that was displayed on the night of January 29th at DCA at Reagan National Airport as the heroic efforts were made to find and save lives. And I commend NTSB Chair Homendy and her team for their significant and diligent work. The calls for action that have been made by the chairman and the ranking member, it seems to me that I can't remember the circumstance in which we had the factual basis to be more unified in a response than what we have with the presence of what Chair Homendy and her team have provided us. In so many instances in Congress, we get this point of view and this point of view, and then we try to hash out who's telling us the truth and what matters in the conversation. And Chairman Homendy, I can't find a circumstance in which NTSB didn't do its job in a way that none of us should have doubts about the conclusions you reached and the recommendations you have provided. There is no excuse for us not to achieve the goal of those recommendations by passing legislation, and perhaps as important, maybe even more importantly, to insist that once we pass legislation, that that legislative effort is rewarded by action by the FAA and others so that it is implemented fully in a way that makes a difference. I've been in Congress enough to see the circumstances in which we often pass legislation, we issue the press release and say we've done something, but we haven't done anything until we've done something, and that means the administration, the execution of those laws to be fully fulfilled. It's our responsibility in this committee and as members of the United States Senate to turn the conclusions of the NTSB report into action. Congress must determine what steps we need to take following those recommendations, and we need to make sure that the FAA, the Army, and all others are following those recommended and enacted safety measures. Following a year-long investigation, NTSB has affirmed, again, that passing and implementing the Rotor Act could have, and I would say would have, saved lives on January the 29th, 2025. The passage and implementation of the Rotor Act is critical to achieving the safety of our skies. I urge the House not to delay. In its passage, the chairman made the point that every day that goes by creates a greater risk for others. If there's something that needs to be addressed in the Rotor Act, don't delay. Let's have the conversation and fix something if there's something missing or wrong. That doesn't mean watering it down. It means fully implementing the Rotor Act as passed, just as soon as we make certain we've got it right. Additionally, Congress must continue to provide the funding that is necessary to further modernize our aviation system, advance new technologies at the FAA. The FAA administrator was in front of us with a roundtable discussion yesterday about implementation of advanced technologies in the system. And we must continue to recruit, train, and support air traffic controllers. No steps back, moving forward, act on the recommendations, and make sure that January 29th never occurs again. Mr. Chairman, I thank you. I appreciate the opportunity I've had to work with you, Senator Cantwell, and Senator Duckworth in this regard.
Thank you. Ranking Member Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you also to Ranking Member Cantwell and to my chairman of the subcommittee, Senator Moran, who's been a joy to work with as a partner on this issue. Chair Homendy, I want to thank you and the entire team at the NTSB for carrying out your mission without fear or favor to independently investigate the DCA midair collision. You provided FAA, DOD, Congress, and most importantly, the families of the victims of Flight 5342 clear answers explaining how this deadly crash happened. And you've given us a framework to ensure such utterly preventable tragedies never happen again. Many of the NTSB's findings from the DCA midair collision point to issues that have persisted for years. The urgent need to address the air traffic controller shortage, the need for advanced safety technology, and the unacceptable lack of coordinated communications between the FAA and the DOD. I've repeatedly sounded the alarm on these issues, and I haven't been the only one. The NTSB found that in prior years, rank-and-file controllers working in the DCA tower sought spacing of at least 4 miles in trail, while Potomac TRACON controllers asked for a decrease in DCA's dangerous airport arrival rate. Yet FAA management failed to act on the warnings being raised by an understaffed and overworked controller workforce that was clearly struggling to manage the busiest, most congested runway in the United States. FAA's failure in the face of blaring alarm bells screaming out that it was a matter of when, not if, one of the near misses at DCA would become a deadly tragedy is, unfortunately, emblematic of a chronic crisis that's plagued FAA for years under multiple administrations, and an unacceptable culture of complacency. Chair Homendy, 826 days ago, you sat in that very chair in this very room to testify alongside FAA at a hearing I convened on addressing close calls to improve aviation safety. That day, your message could not have been clearer as you warned everyone, and I'm quoting you, "The concerning uptick in such incidents is a clear warning sign that the U.S. aviation system is sharply strained. We cannot wait until a fatal accident forces action. We must act before there is a tragedy." And your message was embraced by many in this chamber in a bipartisan way. As I recall, I opened that hearing by stating that our nation is experiencing an aviation safety crisis. Near misses are happening way too frequently, and I refuse to be complacent and waiting to act until the next runway incursion becomes a fatal collision. 826 days ago, we had that exchange. That recognition is why I fought so hard to protect the 1,500-hour rule and to stop Congress from adding more flights to DCA. Unfortunately, on that latter fight, I and the members of Virginia and Maryland delegations were soundly defeated. And as the NTSB report found, the intense traffic demand in the region forced Potomac TRACON to routinely reduce the trail spacing between aircraft, which increased the workload on DCA air traffic controllers. Tragically, the one audience that refused to hear these messages was the one entity with the authority to act, the FAA. And it seems as if the FAA's complacency has only hardened over time, regardless of which political party controls the White House. Again, this is a bipartisan failure. The NTSB report showed that the FAA failed to conduct annual reviews of helicopter routes in the DCA airspace leading up to the DCA midair collision, reviews that would have shown the helicopter route was too close to an approach runway. A review of helicopter routes would have also potentially prevented some of the 15,000 close calls between airplanes and helicopters in the DCA airspace that took place between October of 2021 and December of 2024. We have long known about the mounting strain on air traffic controllers. That is why I will continue to reiterate that any investment in our ATC system must be informed by and prioritize the most important asset of the ATC system, its people. The FAA needs to improve how it reviews relevant safety data on hotspots, how critical feedback from frontline controllers is funneled to decision makers, and most importantly, how to ensure enough rested, well-trained employees are at work every day with all the tools that they need. The House must also act to pass the Rotor Act so we can codify many of the NTSB's recommendations. But even if that happens, there is more work to do. Because the bottom line is that any system that repeatedly forces pilots to take emergency evasive actions to save lives is a broken system. We need to prevent the conditions that will lead to even a near miss. So I thank you again, Chairwoman Homendy. You have been a wonderful resource to this committee. I also thank the leadership of the committee, the chairman, the ranking member, and again, my partner on the subcommittee, Chairman Moran. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I now want to introduce our witness, Ms. Jennifer Homendy, the chairwoman of the National Transportation Safety Board. The NTSB investigates all civilian aviation accidents and other major roadway, pipeline, rail, and marine accidents. We thank Chairwoman Homendy and the NTSB staff for their work to complete the investigation of the DC midair collision in 1 year. Chairwoman Homendy, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Okay. Chairman Cruz, Ranking Member Cantwell, Chairman Moran, Ranking Member Duckworth, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today to discuss our investigation of the midair collision that occurred just over a year ago near Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. As we discuss NTSB's thorough fact-finding, extensive analysis, and comprehensive safety recommendations, I want to make one thing abundantly clear. We should not be here today. In this room, sitting with us or watching online, are family members of the 67 people who died on January 29th. We are so sorry for your loss. You should not have to be here because, as I've said many times, this was 100% preventable. It was preventable. In fact, now that our investigation has concluded, I can say without a shadow of a doubt that we've seen this before. We've investigated similar mid-air collisions going back decades, and we've issued safety recommendations like ADSB in over and over and over again, aimed at preventing just these kinds of collisions. Recommendations that have been rejected, sidelined, or just plain ignored. As Chairman Cruz and Congressman Onder recently wrote, last year's crash was not an isolated incident. It was the fatal result of years of unheeded warnings. Years. 57 years ago, in 1969, we investigated a midair collision between Allegheny Airlines Flight 853 and a small Piper Cherokee outside Shelbyville, Indiana. 83 people died. Soon after, the board held a hearing and issued 14 recommendations aimed at preventing future midair collisions, including our first ever recommendation for FAA to expeditiously develop and implement a collision avoidance system in all civil aircraft. For perspective, that same year, we put a man on the moon. And yet it took another 2 decades and a congressional mandate for FAA to finally implement TCAS. TCAS didn't prevent this accident, but there are technologies that are readily available that could have. If I could pull up my slide, while that's coming up, with ADS-B in, and what maybe I'll give it a second. With ADS-B in, hopefully it'll come up. Technical difficulties. I'll continue on, and when it comes up, I'll explain. With ADS-B in,
I don't do the AV.
yeah, me too. There we go. So on the left side is the PAT 25, and on the right side is Flight 5342. We did a laser scan of exemplar aircraft, and so the gray around is the structure, and then of course you see the night vision goggles on the left side. With ADS-B in, the helicopter pilots would have gotten an audible alert if it was in their headset at 48 seconds prior to collision when they were over Haines Point, allowing them to take action. They never got a single alert. They had no idea that that 5342 was coming from the left. And we can talk about that in the hearing if you'd like. On the right side, outside, looking out of 5342, the CRJ would have gotten their first alert with ADS-B in at 59 seconds prior to collision. Instead, they got a TCAS alert that just said, traffic, traffic. And what they need to do is look out and figure out where that traffic is and take action, which is very difficult to see in many circumstances, and we can talk about why that is too. But traffic, 19.5 seconds prior to collision. They didn't actually recognize that the helicopter was there until 1 second. 1 second prior to collision. Had they gotten ADS-B in, they would have gotten something more along the lines of traffic, 12 o'clock, 2 nautical miles, 500 feet below. Then they could have taken action. What we're talking about here is life-saving information for pilots. It's information. In 2008, we again called on the FAA to implement ADS-B in. We stated the Safety Board believes that the benefits of ADS-B technology warrant rapid adoption, and that the equipage of aircraft with ADS-B in capability will provide an immediate and substantial contribution to safety, underline, especially in and around airports. We said that in 2008. What if the FAA had acted? I want to be clear, though. What happened at DCA could happen anywhere in our airspace. The NTSB has for years, long before this tragedy at DCA, been sounding the alarm about the safety risks of see and avoid. Yet we continue to rely on see and avoid to separate traffic throughout the national airspace when technology is available to provide pilots with the situation awareness they need and deserve to ensure safety. See and avoid is exactly what it sounds like. A pilot has to visually acquire an approaching aircraft, recognize a collision course, decide on action, execute the control movement, and allow the aircraft to respond in a matter of seconds. Since 2008, we've investigated 211 aviation accidents and incidents resulting from a midair collision or loss of separation, which killed 281 people and injured 12 others. In almost half, we raised concerns with see and avoid. These include many in your home states, and I know not all the senators are here, but I'm going to pretend they are, because we investigated since 2008, where we stated our concerns, 16 in Texas, 1 in Kansas, 15 in Alaska, including the 2019 tragedy in Ketchikan, where 6 people died and 10 were injured, and I was the board member on scene, and we discussed at length in that report the lack of ADS-BN requirements for Part 135. 2 in North Carolina, 1 in Missouri, 2 in Utah, 1 in Ohio, 1 in Wyoming, 1 in Michigan, 2 in Wisconsin, 1 in Illinois, 12 in Nevada, 7 in Colorado, 2 in Pennsylvania, 4 in New Jersey, and now 1 in DC. The fact is, our aviation system is the safest in the world for a reason. Thanks to the work of you all, the work of the entire Congress, our work at NTSB, the work of our partners at FAA, redundancy has been built into the system to prevent catastrophe, but that doesn't mean system flaws don't exist. Our aviation system is complex. The national airspace system is complex, but it is generally safe, which means many, many things have to go wrong for a tragedy like this to occur. And we have an obligation to fix those vulnerabilities. The question before us is how many more people need to die before we act? How many more people need to die before we act? I've heard others say it can't be done, it's too expensive, the technology isn't available, the risk is only at DCA. None of that is true. Absolutely none of it. The technology is available with an iPhone or an iPad, a headset, this is mine, and a cable, and a few $100s for a receiver. That's what this is, ADS-BN receiver. Even the oldest general aviation planes can be outfitted with ADS-BN. The gentleman behind me from who is the director of our Office of Aviation Safety, he has no electricity in his plane. This is what he has. He has ADS-BN with an iPad. In commercial aviation, American Airlines has equipped its entire fleet of more than 300 Airbus A321 aircraft with ADS-BN. I was in the cockpit to look at it. Flew to Phoenix from here. You know how much it cost them? I asked the COO, less than $50,000 per plane to retrofit. Boeing offers it on new planes. Airbus offers it on new planes. Gulfstream includes it. It is possible. The technology is available, so we can solve this problem and save lives. We should not have to be here, and we wouldn't be if the NTSB's warnings had been heeded. Exactly 17 years ago, Colgan Air Flight 3407 crashed in New York. 50 people died. In response to that accident, we issued 25 new safety recommendations to the FAA. 10 were closed unacceptable action, because they weren't going to do anything about it. In the letters, they told us, don't ask anymore. 1 is open unacceptable. We cannot allow this to happen again. Every single one of the 50 safety recommendations we issued in response to the DCA catastrophe must be acted on immediately. The FAA has had multiple opportunities to implement NTSB recommendations. Time after time, they've declined. Now we need action, whether that's through the FAA, and they can implement a lot of the recommendations we just issued. Some of them are simple, and we can talk about that. Army, Department of War, or an act of Congress. We cannot accept having to be here years from now lamenting yet more inaction. Not only must we do this for the 67 people who died on January 29th, we must do this for all those who lost their lives in accidents that the NTSB has investigated. We must do this for their families. We must do this for future generations. Lives we can still save. Chairman Cruz, Ranking Member Cantwell, Chairman Moran, Ranking Member Duckworth, I am immensely grateful to you and the members of this committee for your robust advocacy via the Bipartisan Rotor Act. Not only do I want to thank you for your incredible leadership, but I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for your willingness to stand up and do what's right for safety. I look forward to working with you to create a future where no family ever has to endure such tremendous loss. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In just a moment, Chairwoman Homendy is going to play a short video simulation that the NTSB produced that includes the transcript of the cockpit voice recordings along with air traffic control transmission. And I will say right before this hearing began, the chairwoman played for the members of this committee in the back conference room the video along with the audio of the cockpit voice transmissions. Under federal law, we're not allowed to play the actual voice transmissions publicly. But I will tell you, watching and listening, and for any members that did not see that, I'm certain the chairwoman would be happy to give you the opportunity to see it and listen to it. It is positively horrifying. And watching it and listening to the voices of the pilots makes you sick to your stomach. After watching it, it is indisputable that ADSB in and out could have prevented and likely would have prevented this accident. And we have an obligation to prevent the next accident. I do want to give a moment if any of the family members wish to step out and not watch the video. We'd certainly understand that, and so I want to give you an opportunity if you would prefer not to watch it. And Madam Chair, you can play the video now.
This animation presents a simulated view from the right seat of the helicopter. A dark gray structural mask generated from a three-dimensional laser scan of an exemplar aircraft is overlaid on the scene. A light gray mask depicts the mounting